Okay, now I want to go a little bit further into the 90s rap scene, particularly looking into the transition between mainstream hip hop that you saw in the late 80s, which was internationally not as known as it is today. You had artists such as LL Cool J, which were formerly very, very famous around the world, but, really small time rappers that didn't have the huge record deals, you didn't know who they were. You didn't have the internet. Mixtape shops, small rap concerts. That was the way a lot of rappers got their name out. If they didn't get picked up by a major label, the world just didn't know who they were. That was the way things worked back then. Okay, there was a transition in the early 90s, dealing with groups like Kid and Play, going to groups like transitioning into more of a gangster image like Criss Cross. Films like House Party that went to movies like Menace to Society. And you have to get more familiar with where rap comes from and rap culture comes from, and you have to be familiar with the black community. Okay, now here is a photograph of Tone Loc, famous rapper, came out with Funky Comedema, way back in the day. A lot of people love Tone Loc. He did a part in the film Poetic Justice with Janet Jackson and Tupac Shakur. Tone Loc played a small part in that film. Tone Loc, it was famous at the time. Okay, a well-known rapper. Now Tone Loc wore the sunglasses, the Lokes. Tone Loc, the Lokester, and the mainstream culture, especially middle class people, didn't really get the whole facade of what Tone Loc was carrying. This goes back to the black community in the 60s. And we're going to move on and show, here you go, the Black Panther Party with the leather coat, the leather jacket, and the sunglasses, the Lokes. Okay. This is where a lot of rappers got their image from, knowing or not knowing. Okay? And these guys made the sunglasses and the leather coat world famous on a street level. In the black community, having a leather coat was a big deal. Okay. And of course, you're talking about the late 60s, 70s, when these guys weren't rapping. There was music going on, but not hip hop in today's world. Here is a well-known community activist at the time, Bunchy Carter, with a Black Panther member, just sitting there wearing a leather coat. And in the 60s, when the civil rights movement came to an end, in the late 60s, when it came to an end, you had the younger kids still carried the leather coat, the sunglasses. They still wanted to be a part of that, knowingly or not knowingly. Of course, now you have the Chicano community picked it up as well. Young Hispanic guys wore sunglasses, and they also were involved with the Black Panther Party to some degree. You see here, brown berets. This is a young Chicano man with a Black Panther together. And this is, of course, during the 1960s, and so they had similar, they were probably going through similar struggles. The Mexican community was dealing with a lot of their own struggles, such as the black community was dealing with a lot of their own struggles, and so the two groups would, speak and unite under that. But this man isn't wearing sunglasses or a leather coat, but you can still see the same hardcore image with the arms crossed. Look how the arms are crossed. Now look at Tone Loc's arms. Tone Loc got the sunglasses, arms crossed, such as these guys do. This is where, when you see the early 90s rappers, this is sort of where the anger that a lot of people were shocked by in the early 90s came from. Coming out of the civil rights movement, a lot of the issues that had went on, it was still there. A lot of the anger and the problems in these communities was still there. So again, going back to the early 90s, in late 80s, early 90s, when the focus shifted in the black community from being on black women singers, like Paula Abdul and whatnot, and shifted to young black men. Well, the image of the young black man had not changed yet. There were still problems going on in the black community. People were still being bullied and beat up and harassed by the police. The black community was still just as bad in a lot of ways as it had been. And there was a lot of achievements and advancements, but the anger was still there. There was problems still there. So a lot of these younger guys were misunderstood. A lot of these people were misunderstood in the late 80s and early 90s. See, the arms crossed like that. So in a way, guys like Tone Loc, subconsciously, you see with the African beads and whatnot on, subconsciously we're still carrying on the political legacy. So that's something fascinating. Now, I'm going to try to get some more collection of some more photographs together to show a little bit. There was things going on in the magazines back then, issues people had with each other. And I'm gonna try to depict a more realistic image of what it was like for rappers at that time, what they had to go up against. They had controversy with other rappers, or how the media depicted them. A lot of times these guys had to constantly defend themselves and explain their music. They were constantly asked by reporters, "Why is your music so violent?" Not that Tone Loc's music didn't represent violence, but there was a lot of these guys were constantly attacked by the mainstream, more of the traditional gangster rap music.